As Americans grow up and enter adulthood, we leave some things behind us in our childhoods that our American culture dictates grown-ups should not do. But then we moved to Germany and found German adults doing those exact things you won't find American adults doing.
Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. I am Donnie.
And I'm Aubrey.
And we are two Americans currently living in Germany and sharing all of our experiences living and traveling throughout Europe. We talk a lot about cultural differences between the US and Germany, and a lot of those times they are just different perspectives and approaches to various everyday situations and are not right or wrong either way, but are completely unique and different in both countries. An example would be Germans' diagonal tie stripes going from the right hip to the left shoulder and American diagonal stripes going from the left hip to the right shoulder. However, we have started to pick up on some things that we see in Germany that are the exact same as things done in the US, but American culture dictates that those things should not be done by adults, yet German culture dictates that it is just the way things are done. From modes of transportation to some social behaviors Americans find uncouth, there are simply some things German adults do you won't find American adults doing. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about today in our video, Uncouth or Just the Youth, Cultural Differences for the Long in Tooth.
Our experiences are definitely specific to where we are originally from, a state in the southern US called Oklahoma, and where we live now in the southwestern German state of Rhineland Falls. Both of those places have their own unique subcultures that may not be representative of the two countries as a whole. Therefore, let us know your experiences with these things in the comments below and where you're from. Also, if you're from a different country than these two, we want to hear about what these things are like where you live.
Let's start off with a pretty low-key difference that many Americans note when they arrive in Germany for the first time because they are not used to seeing adults doing this thing, and that is riding bicycles. In the US, some adults do, of course, ride bicycles sometimes, whether it is for those that are doing it for athletic reasons and are decked out in their bike riding sport gear, or in some larger cities, adults may ride their bikes to commute. However, in general, a bicycle is not viewed as a legitimate mode of transportation in many parts of the US, and rather is viewed as a children's toy. Before we arrived in Germany and bought bikes for the first time in our adult lives, we both had bikes when we were kids and we rode them a little bit in college, but that is generally where many Americans outgrow riding a bicycle.
44% of people in Germany regularly use a bicycle, unlike in the US, where that number was only 12.4% in 2016. There are many factors that play into this, like in the US, everything is so spread out that a car is normally the most convenient means of getting around, or how in Germany, they have prioritized biking and created amazing bike paths all over the country, unlike in the US. Germany is not on the biking level as, say, the Netherlands, but overall, especially on a sunny and beautiful spring day, German bike paths will be full of adults and children out biking. Given the same type of day in the US, many Americans will be out, but most adults don't even own a bike to be able to ride.
It is extremely common, however, for American children to have bicycles they ride around their neighborhoods, but in fact, even that number is actually shrinking, and from 2007 to 2019, children's participation in bike riding has declined 19%. So it definitely is not that a bike is strictly viewed as only a children's toy in the US, but there are just many factors that contribute to the fact that many adults don't own a bike, unlike many Germans, and therefore it is viewed primarily as a children's toy rather than a legitimate means of commuting in many cases, and can therefore be a unique experience for Americans traveling to Germany and seeing so many adults riding bicycles.
One stereotype that we hear a lot of foreigners living in Germany talk about is when they are walking around that Germans love to stare at other people who are around them and catch their eye, maybe because they're out of the norm. Honestly, we haven't necessarily noticed Germans staring a ton more than other Americans do. Not that we can disprove this stereotype, but that is one reason we have never brought it up. However, there is something relating to Germans and staring that we have seemed to notice is different than in the US.
In the US, we are taught from a very young age that that it is rude to stare. It is super common for a little curious kid who sees something out of the ordinary and can't stop staring for their American parent to snap at them, telling them it is rude to stare and they need to look away. Yet, a common pastime in America is called people watching. One of the best places to people watch is at the state fair, for example. When we would have the Oklahoma State Fair, people would often ask their friends if they would want to go people watching down at the fairgrounds, and they would sit on a bench and watch what kind of unique people the state fair attracted.
So here's the difference we have noticed about Germans and Americans in this particular area. When Americans are people watching, they will stare at people passing by, but right at the moment that person feels the stares and looks, a staring American will not want to be perceived as rude, so they will frantically glance away as if they never even saw them. On the other hand, we have caught Germans sometimes staring at us as we walk by, but when we notice and look at them, they just own it and will continue staring and not bat an eye. So if we had to guess, that is probably why foreigners talk about the German stare. It is not that Americans don't also stare, it is just that American adults will bounce their eyes quickly after being caught, unlike a German who just owns their German stariness. We contribute this to the German directness and lack of fear of conflict, unlike Americans who like to avoid conflict, but let us know your thoughts in the comments. Have you noticed either of these practices or that Germans tend to stare a lot? And why does it seem that this is the case?
Real quick, I want to say thanks for watching this video. It is not sponsored by anybody, so you guys watching it and interacting with it is the only thing that supports this video. Please remember to hit that like and subscribe button so others can find our videos and hopefully enjoy them as well. That's it. Now let's get back to the video.
We get asked all the time to make a video about the differences between German and American table etiquette, and in a recent video, we discussed the misconception that Americans cut up all their food like a child, unlike in Germany where they cut one bite at a time as any adult should. Again, that is wrong, and Americans don't really do that. Or at least are not supposed to do that according to our table etiquette. And you can watch that video to find out more on that subject. But in Germany, there is a table etiquette difference that American adults are not supposed to do, and that is resting our hands on the table while we eat.
We have actually even gotten comments that it makes some German viewers uncomfortable that we sit with our hands under the table when we are filming. And that is largely due to the difference between Americans and Germans when it comes to what we are used to at the dinner table. German dining etiquette dictates that your hands should be visible above the table, which means that you rest your wrists on the table while you're eating. For American dining etiquette, we keep our hands not being used in our lap, and it is considered bad table etiquette to have your hands, arms, or elbows on the table. Now, there is no point in saying which one is right or wrong. They are just different sets of rules and customs. In fact, for most American meals outside of very formal settings, we eat fairly informally and every rule doesn't necessarily have to be adhered to. However, resting your arms on a table is one that children learn very young to refrain from doing. So next time you want to comment that you don't like our hands below the table and it makes you uncomfortable, this is just our culture dictating what we do and you can't change that.
This next difference is one that, honestly, is probably the most alarming of them all. Well, at least to Donnie anyways, and most adult men in America for that matter. Well, maybe Donnie should introduce this one actually.
Okay, I'll take this one over. And one thing that adult American males don't do that German males do is, well, they sit when they urinate.
In 2015, the BBC reported on a landlord in Dusseldorf that was seeking damages from a tenant because he claimed the marble floor had been damaged by urine due to the man standing up when he urinated. However, a judge ruled that the man's method was within cultural norms, saying urinating standing up is still common practice. So do all German men sit in the restroom? Based on the judge's decision, no. However, even just the phrasing still common practice kind of gives the hint that it is old-fashioned, yet people still do it.
I can speak from first-hand experience that it definitely is something that is done, even just from the fact there will sometimes be signs over toilets that ask men politely to please sit down when they urinate. When I studied abroad in college and lived with a German family, this was even something that was brought up to the American male participants that we should do in our host home out of respect for our hosts. Now, even though you mostly use the restroom privately anyways, and people shouldn't be concerned with how you position yourself to use the toilet, in the US, this is viewed as very unmanly behavior, and American men will not do it at the risk of losing a bit of their dignity. In fact, even in Germany, a man can be called a Sitzpinkler, and the BBC article from earlier states that this is a term used to imply non-masculine behavior. So it does seem that there could be a bit of a split mind in which it is viewed as not masculine, but it is also increasingly becoming the norm amongst German men to sit and urinate. I will also point out that in German public restrooms, you definitely still will find urinals.
You may be asking, what is the point and why do some men stand and some men sit? Well, as a woman, I really don't know, but I do know that sitting is supposed to be viewed as the cleaner and more sanitary way of doing it. And that is apparently evident from the uric acid damage outside of the toilet in that particular court case in Dusseldorf. So I'm not gonna ask you personally to explain what you do in the bathroom because frankly, that does not interest me. But what does interest me, I am sure you all have heard the popular English way of saying, I have to go number 1 to refer to urinating and number 2 to refer to the other one. But is there a popular code phrase in German that people say to describe what they need to do in a restroom? So whether it be riding a bike or sitting to go number 1, there are some culture differences that for one country is normal and for another is not done by adults. Does that make one better or worse than the other? Of course not. These are just two different cultures that look at the world from two different perspectives, one from sitting down and one from standing up. And that is something that should be acknowledged and appreciated.
We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that like and subscribe button. Also, to see who made it this far in the video, full fat milk or reduced fat milk? Which one do you drink? Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in our next video.
Cheers!
An example would be German's diagonal stripe. An example would be for the long in tooth.
You're so clever.
Thanks.
We get asked all the time to make a video about the differences.
Hold on, okay.